Hey everyone, today I'm creating these cards using some leftover pattern paper from an A5 pack called These Days, and it is from Cocoa Vanilla. Cocoa Vanilla is an Australian company and I discovered them last year. Thank you to a subscriber who pointed them out. Cocoa Vanilla and Uniquely Creative were two companies in Australia I had not used before. I had mainly used Kaisercraft and Paper Rose. But these papers are so pretty, I really didn't want to let them go to waste sitting in a pile of leftovers. And I thought I could just do some really simple cards by using some of this craft cardstock or craft paper as a matting layer and loading up some of these strips of paper. So this is very, very simple for this video, but I wanted to get as many cards as I could while at least having a little bit of interest. So I decided to line them up on these A4 pieces of white matting paper. This is heavier than standard copy paper. It's probably about 160 GSM, and I could easily add 5 of these panels to each sheet of the white paper. So you can see here that I've just added all of the strips and then I'm going to trim them down so that I have about an 8 1/4 inch strip. What this means is it is the absolute perfect length to do across two 5 1/4 by 4 inch craft matting layers. So I can get 2 cards out of each one of these strips. Now, not all of these pattern papers are my favorite. So what I decided to do after I'd gone through and trimmed them down is to sort them into 2 piles. One pile is really beautiful paper that I think is a true highlight, and the others are a little bit simpler, maybe a bit more plain, and to make them a bit of an interesting card, I might need to use some more interesting embellishments on them. So that's how I decided to split these down into 2. I also have some of these that I'm thinking may not be great for cards without at least some extra layers or some extra interest, and you'll see a little bit later there's a couple of these pattern papers that are essentially frames with some flowers around them. So the print is frames with flowers around them. And what that means is when they're a pattern paper strip, they're a little bit cut off and maybe the design's a little bit big for it to be interesting as a 1 inch strip. And well, not 1 inch, these are about 1.5, 1 3/4 inch strips. So I chose not to use those ones in the end. Now you can see here that I am just trimming off the edges. All of these pieces that are not being used, the small bits off the end will just go in my recycling, but these slightly bigger ones, I'm putting them aside and I'll use them for one of 2 reasons. Either I'll use them as a design element on a future card, or I'll use them as almost as a replacement for foam tape if I need to put something behind an element to prop it up a little bit just so that it's nice and even, then I'll use those down the track. You can see here that with the 8 1/4 inch strip, I had just attached it to 2 of the backing panels and now I'm trimming them down. As long as you get it nice and flat, it's pretty easy to do. I now have some extra elements from the These Days embellishment packs. I've got some flowers and some sentiments, and then a couple of these little square and rectangle pictures. There's also these little strips that are intended to be a sentiment box. So I just grabbed a happy birthday, and then I grabbed some grey ink, and I just stamped a happy birthday into those, and I can use them or not use them. At this stage, I'm really not sure what my plan is. All I've done is prepare my card bases, add the brown matting layer or craft matting layer. Then I've added the layered strip of paper, and you can see across the top of my screen that I have loads of half completed cards. I often end up with these and stop a project midway, by the way. But for this one, I'm choosing to finish up as much of my leftover sentiments as I can. The trick to this is if I just mat everything in a white layer, then it's going to look a little better when I layer it on a card. So if I run through and do this before I match it up with the half-finished card bases, then at least everything's ready to attach. So I'm not doing much card design in advance for these. It's literally a case of preparing the leftover bits and pieces so that they're a die cut or some ephemera or something similar, and now I can just match it up with the card panels themselves. Here you can see I've got the pink strip of paper, and I've picked these cute little typewriters to attach, and I've put just a little bit of cardstock behind to prop it up a little bit so that it's nice and even and it doesn't dip down the side. And then my first 2 cards are actually completed. The rest of these are pretty straightforward. It's a matter of just, either deciding on a card that I want to use and finish, or deciding on an embellishment that I think would match really well with something else. Because these are from the same paper collection, it does make it really, really simple to complete the cards, because basically everything already matches. There is nothing different. There's no color schemes that are a little bit strange. I will say that with this, for example, the door in the house was blue, so matching it up with the blue strip meant that just offset the balance of the pink and blue really nicely. So there's a few design choices that I make along the way based on the elements, but I'm pretty much guaranteed that things are going to match, and I'm not going to have too many problems trying to make sure that everything looks great. You can see here that I've decided to add a little design element first here with the sentiment. Honestly, I just look at what kind of speaks to me. That sounds a bit weird, but whatever I think just jumps off the mat there, I pick it up, I add it to the card, and I try not to think about it too much. As long as the sentiment is something where I think the card will be used, and as long as I have a few design ideas that I can mix and match, then everything will work out just fine. For this one here, the watercolor stripes are absolutely gorgeous, and the colors just jump off that craft. The contrast is really pretty. And I decided that if I did one big flower and one smaller flower, that they would offset really nicely. And because I've piled all the flowers up in size and color order, as long as I'm not ending up with 2 that are the same, then I think it's going to work out really well. So I've glued down the first flower just with my liquid glue, and I'm using Belly Arts liquid glue today. And then I'm adding some foam tape that you cannot see because I'm off screen, trying to use up some of these little squares. I don't have too much foam tape left because I normally use leftover scrap cardstock, but for these little elements, it's kind of nice just to have that little step up for the second flower. So I'm running through, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing for all 4 of these. So it means that I don't have to design 30, 40 individual cards. If I can do a few of them that are the same or similar, then that means that I don't have to make as many choices, and my crafting is not taking forever. So I do love to make cards, but I also like to use up my supplies because I'm very conscious that it feels like I have a never-ending supply of crafty bits and pieces. And while I am trying to not purchase as many things, the pattern papers, every time I see them, they just speak to me. So I will admit that I do still have new purchases coming through the door, even though I'm trying to finish off what I have as well. Now, with this one here, I decided to use some of the little love hearts. There is a message in the typewriter, and so I thought by adding the little frame behind it and offsetting the typewriter, it means I don't have to put something really specifically inside the frame. So I'm using it as a design element as opposed to needing to put some text or some wording or maybe stamp a sentiment into the frame. Today, I've tried to use what I have and not necessarily include any stamping or anything else. Just the stamping of those sentiments that I did with the happy birthday a little earlier. And other than that, all I'm doing is attaching things to these cards with my glue and trying to create things that don't have a lot of layers or too much overlap or too much busyness, but actually make the most of the pattern paper in the colored strip and all of these little ephemera pieces. And I think I'm doing a good job so far. I was not finding this difficult at all. And I do think my tip for you is if you're trying to work your way through some of your supplies, laying them all out on your desk is a really good way to start. And if you like the look of having things matted, then matting them all at the beginning and laying them out and then deciding what goes with what, especially if you're using up leftovers, is a really, really good way to make, I don't know, some pretty fast progress. If you're enjoying the video, it would be great if you could hit the like button. That is how YouTube knows that you're enjoying the video, and it does help it spread to more viewers. I have a question for you. Do you like seeing videos where you start with a brand new paper pad and do just a few cards from it? Or do you prefer a full paper pad when the full 6x6 is used up in one video? Or perhaps some of these videos where it's using up some leftovers and trying to make the best of what you have left behind. I know that people like different types of videos, but I'm just curious which ones you'd like to see more of, because I do have some leftover piles that I'd love to work through, but I also have brand new paper pads that I really want to do some crafty projects with as well. So maybe let me know in the comments below which are your favorites, and that might influence what I open up next. Okay, so these flowers are absolutely gorgeous. And now that I've added the little birdhouse strips to the side of these green ones, I think that's added just a little bit of an extra element to these cards that is helpful, because the pattern paper itself with the green and white foliage probably was not as interesting as the ones that I had before with the really beautiful watercolor stripes. They were absolutely gorgeous. Now that we're moving on to one that's a little bit busier, that has the flowers on it itself, with this one, I really considered just putting a sentiment and leaving it. But then I decided I was probably better off adding a little bit of extra interest. So I put flowers on top of flowers. I wasn't so convinced, but I do think it still looks cute. Like the design of the pattern paper and the little flowers is gorgeous. Maybe what I should have done is created a little bit more elevation and put some cardstock or maybe some of the foam adhesive behind it, just to create a little bit of shadow. Either way, still super cute cards. And I'm not a really big floral person, but these ones are such pretty colors that even I would love receiving this type of card. Are there any brands of pattern paper or craft supplies that you absolutely love that you think I should try? I traditionally try and buy things from either scrapbook.com, and you'll see any links below to products that I've used today. They will be affiliate links, which means I may receive a small commission, but at no additional cost to you. Using those links does help creators a lot, and you don't have to buy the exact items. You can just click on it, go to the store, and anything that you buy from there, a small percentage comes back to the creator. So it's helpful to use those, not necessarily mine, use whatever creator that you're watching, but it does help them a lot if you are using those. I don't think this paper pack is available anymore through Cocoa Vanilla. You can still purchase some of the flowers, and they come in stickers and puffy stickers, and I think there's maybe some little cards that are similar to Project Life. They are absolutely perfect to add to your project, so I highly recommend them. The color palette is absolutely gorgeous. Here you can see with these butterflies, I did not want to cover them up. And so before with the flowers, I was considering just adding a sentiment. That's exactly what I've done with this butterfly paper. It is absolutely gorgeous, and I didn't want to load anything up on top of it and hide those pretty butterflies. So they're probably the simplest cards that I made today. At this point, I'm starting to run out of ephemera, and I'm starting to try and work out how much of it should I put on the card? Is the card got enough elements to be interesting? And then often with these little sprigs of leaves, they can be a little bit tricky to, I guess, layer up and have them not look like they're just sitting floating on the card somewhere. So for this next one here, where I've actually put the sentiment off to the right, it worked out absolutely perfectly. And then for these next couple, because I'm down to only a few little flowers and a few little sprigs, I actually attach the sentiment on the left-hand side with those elements. So rather than spreading it out and it looking like there was a few small things just kind of spaced randomly on the card, I tried to at least create a little cluster there on the left. And with the white and black pattern paper behind it, which is really kind of a sketchy look, I think this worked out really, really nicely. I was very happy that I was able to finish off all of the elements in this pack, even if it was just adding a little heart or adding a little flower. And I've ended up with a few cards at the end that I wasn't too sure that I was going to use at the beginning. And because I've had all of these elements put to absolutely great use, I've got 4 cards that I think need something else attached to them, and I'm going to put them in my incomplete pile, and at some point I will create something amazing that I can put on top of those, and they will look complete and finished. So I'm just going to add the sentiment to these 4 and finish them off, and they'll be done. So I hope you enjoyed. I have put another link here to another video. Have a great day.